Hey, it's October 3rd, and today's going to be the accomplishment of a big project, which is finally finishing off at least the soil mixture part today for the carnivorous plant garden. The second side, I got the first side done yesterday or last week, and this week I'm going to finish the second side and hopefully knock that out. So I'm going to try and give you step by step on this so that you know how to do this if you're so interested. So let's get started. So since we moved to the new place, I wanted to do something a little bit more formal for the carnivorous plants. And so we're doing an industrial kind of style for the patio. And so the bog garden is going to be raised this go around instead of in the ground, which you can do them in the ground. But the soil here is very, very hard to dig. And on top of that, the way the garden slopes here, I don't want to do a sunken garden because I won't be able to control the way the water runs over it. So, we came up with this raised bed. The reason I have it divided in half here is A, it looks good, and B, in order to do the pond liner in here and not have to pay like $300 for one that will fit, I got two 7x10s, and that will be enough to do both sides of this. So I've got the structure built. It's not completely perfect, but I don't care. I don't want it to be perfect. I want it to kind of show a little bit of age, like it's been here for a while. And then, of course, we're putting mature carnivorous plants into this, along with some seedlings, but most of them are mature. And it's just going to look really great and really balanced. So you see this side I finished last week. And the first step is to line the pond, or line the bed. So unlike previous designs, I had to cut the pond liner to fit the bed I was using, and it wasted a lot of pond liner. So this time we're using the concrete blocks, the capstones, to secure the pond liner, and I don't have to do any cutting, which is great because it stays in place, and we're going to put the soil level high enough where the water's going to run out over the capstones, and that will serve as drainage. If I don't feel it's not draining that well, I'll go in below the soil and do one inch slits all around the sides. But I think it's going to be fine, especially right now when we haven't had a lot of rain. So let's go ahead and start securing this. Okay, so it's taken me about 20 minutes to get this far. I've got the liner stabilized at both ends. There's still a little give in there, so I'll straighten this part out, but pretty much it's just about lined. And you want to make sure that when you do line your pond that there's no sharp rocks at the base, because you don't want a hole in the bottom. The whole point of this is to give the plants the moisture requirements that they need, which is like boggy conditions. And this is about an 8 to 12 inch, or this is about a 12-inch deep bed right here. You need 12 to 18 inches so that they have enough room to send down roots, but also have enough to hold water, which will then wick up to the drier parts through the drier parts of the season. If you get adequate rainfall, which we typically do in the southeast, the summer and fall being exceptions, we can pretty much just let these be once they get planted, and they just do their own thing. We don't really have to do a whole lot to them. They catch a lot of insects on their own, so they get their nutrients from that. And I'm going to finish lining this out and then start mixing soil, which is the hard part. And we'll talk about soil requirements in just a sec. All right, so let's talk soil requirements. So if you're a specialized plant, you obviously need a specialized soil mix in order to thrive. If you think about where carnivorous plants come from, typically bogs or wetlands, it's mostly like a peat, sphagnum moss, or variation thereof, where the soil is really acidic and lacks a lot of nutrients. And the one thing about carnivorous plants is that they still photosynthesize just like regular green plants do, but they have adapted to live in and thrive in low nutrient conditions by adapting their leaves to catch insects and slowly digest them for the nutrient content. So you're not feeding your carnivorous plants any kind of fertilizer or anything. The insects take care of that, and you don't want to have a soil that has any nutrients in it or high in nutrients, just for this fact. And so you want to use peat moss, which is a and use the milled peat moss instead of the sphagnum moss, like the whole bales, which is just really expensive to find anyway. The other part, that for in-ground and big installations, I use coarse sand, and we're doing this like 80% peat moss in here and 10% sand on this mix, and then 10% perlite. And you don't want to use vermiculite, you want to use perlite, because perlite helps the soil drain and increases airflow. Vermiculite will hold moisture and not allow it to breathe. So you don't want to use vermiculite. If you see a recipe for a vermiculite-based carnivorous plant soil, avoid it, don't use it. In a pot situation, if I were, which I'm going to do, a couple of raised pots with carnivorous plants in them, I would do a 50-50 perlite and sphagnum moss mix. It just keeps the air circulation and the water circulation a lot better in a smaller container. So I'm going to mix this up and then wet it down and get it to the consistency I need it to be. And then we'll start filling in the garden. So I have the soil, the dry components mixed together, and now I'm going to add water. And the thing about peat moss is that it like soaks up water really fast and retains it, which makes it a great soil amendment. But you don't want to oversaturate it. So I'll stop and I'll mix this up. And you can see how much just the top layer soaked in. It's going to be a lot more mixing. It takes me about 3 water additions to get this to a consistency I want. So I've got my first batch mixed, and you can see that it's wet, but you can start to squeeze water out of it. That's perfect. You don't want to get it too soggy, like where it's floating and all that. And over the next 12 hours, 24 hours, this is going to absorb all this moisture and be perfect to plant carnivorous plants in. So I'm gonna go ahead and just mix the rest of the day, and when I get it filled about halfway, I'll show you that, and then show you when it's filled, and tomorrow we'll pick up on plants. Alright, so I'm about at the halfway point. Thank God. This is a lot of work. Of the whole bog garden process, I hate this the most. It's actually a really nice fall day here, but in direct sunlight, it's a little rough to work in still. So gonna take a short break, finish filling this up, and then we'll cap it off for the day. So the bed is full now, and we're gonna go ahead and let it sit overnight. Usually want to let it rest for about 12 hours to 24 hours. And this gives it time to expand and also soak in as much of the water as possible. And then tomorrow morning we'll go ahead and we'll start planting. And I've got enough to do basically this again. More specimen plants in these beds than just like multiples of things. I've got some really cool plants that are so colorful right now. Fall is like the best time for these plants. Like, just look at that. If you want some real color in the fall, these are just amazing. I mean, look at that. Just gorgeous. And look at the lip on this one. It's just such a bright red. And this is just scarlet. It's so gorgeous. And you can see a wasp on dangerous grounds right there. But again, you can see that they hook their legs onto the edge of the lip, and they don't fall in. So I don't know that they get to steal any of the nectar, but it's pretty ingenious that they have figured that out. So yeah, this is great, and I highly encourage you to do them if you're in the correct zone. We're in zone 7, and we can do these plants that can tolerate zone 6 and above will live here. So this is really great, and to have this, it's just been like I never thought I would have like this kind of a garden. So tomorrow we'll be planting that bed, and we're gonna knock this project out.